Coleman. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I wanted to have a chat with you because our friend Josh told me that you've joined a guitar group and it sounds interesting. I'd really like to learn myself.
Why don't you come along? I'm sure there's room for another person.
Really? So, who runs the classes?
He's called a coordinator. His name's Gary Matheson.
Let me note that down. Gary... How do you spell his surname?
It's Matheson.
Right, thanks.
He's retired, actually, but he's a really nice guy, and he used to play in a lot of bands.
Thanks. So, how long have you been going?
About a month now.
And could you play anything before you started?
I knew a few chords, but that's all.
I'm sure everyone will be better than me.
That's what I thought too. When I first spoke to Gary on the phone, he said it was a class for beginners, but I was still worried that everyone would be better than me. But we were all equally hopeless.
Oh, that's reassuring. So, where do you meet?
Well, when I joined the group, they were meeting in Gary's home. But as the group got bigger, he decided to book a room at the college in town. I prefer going there.
I know that place. I used to go to tap dancing classes there when I was at secondary school. I haven't been since, though, and I can't remember what road it's in. Is it Lock Street?
It's just beyond there, at the bottom of New Street, near the city roundabout.
Yes, of course.
The guitar club is on the first floor in room T347.
Right. And when do you meet? Is it at the weekend?
We meet on Thursdays. It used to be 10:30, and that suited me well. But now we meet at 11. The class that's in there before us asked if they could have the room for another 30 minutes.
Oh, I see. Well, I'd love to come, but I don't have a guitar.
Well, you can always buy a second-hand one. There's a website called The Perfect Instrument that sells all kinds of guitars, violins, and so on. I'm sure you'll find something there.
So, what's a typical lesson like with Gary?
Well, he always starts by getting us to tune our guitars. That takes about 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Some people have an app they use, but others do it by ear. Gary goes round and helps them. And while he's doing that, he tells us what he's going to do during the lesson.
Right.
First, we usually spend about 10 minutes doing some strumming.
So, is that using... what are they called? Plectrums?
No, we just use our thumbs.
Oh, much easier.
Gary reminds us where to put our fingers for each chord, and then we play them together. Sometimes we all just start laughing because we're so bad at keeping time. So Gary starts clapping to help us.
Do you learn to play any songs?
Yes, we do at least one song with words and chords. I mean, that's harder than you think.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
That part of the lesson takes about 15 minutes. He often brings a recording of the song and plays it to us first. Then he hands out the song, and if there's a new chord in it, we practice that before we play it together, but really slowly.
Do you do any finger picking?
That's the last 10 minutes of the lesson. when we pick out the individual notes from a tune he's made up. It's always quite simple.
That must be hard, though.
It is. But people like it because they can really concentrate. And if we're all playing well, it sounds quite impressive. The only trouble is that he sometimes gets us to play one at a time. You know, alone.
Oh, that's scary.
It is. But I've got used to it now. At the end, he spends about 5 minutes telling us what to practice for the following week.
Well, thanks, Coleman. I'll go and have a look at that website, I think.
I never really planned to be a lifeboat volunteer when I came to live in North Sea. I'd been working in London as a website designer, but although that was interesting, I didn't like city life. I'd been really keen on boats as a teenager, and I thought if I went to live by the sea, I might be able to pursue that interest a bit more in my free time. Then I found that the Lifeboat Institution was looking for volunteers, so I decided to apply. The Lifeboat Institution building here in North Sea is hard to miss. It's one of the largest in the country. It was built 15 years ago, with funds provided by a generous member of the public who'd lived here all her life. As the Lifeboat Institution is a charity that relies on that kind of donation, rather than funding provided by the government, that was a huge help to us. When I applied, I had to have a health assessment. The doctors were particularly interested in my vision. I used to be short-sighted, so I'd had to wear glasses, but I'd had laser eye surgery 2 years earlier, so that was okay. They gave me tests for colour blindness, and they thought I might have a problem there, but it turned out I was okay. When the Coast Guard gets an alert, all the volunteers are contacted and rush to the lifeboat station. Our target's to get there in 5 minutes. Then we try to get the boat off the dock and out to sea in another 6 to 8 minutes. Our team's proud that we usually achieve that. The average time across the country's 8.5 minutes. I've recently qualified as what's called a helmsman, which means I have the ultimate responsibility for the lifeboat. I have to check that the equipment we use is in working order. The crew have special life jackets that can support up to 4 people in the water, and it's ultimately my decision whether it's safe to launch the boat. But it's very rare not to launch it, even in the worst weather. As well as going out on the lifeboat, my work involves other things too. A lot of people underestimate how quickly conditions can change at sea, so I speak to youth groups and sailing clubs in the area about the sorts of problems that sailors and swimmers can have if the weather suddenly gets bad. We also have a lot of volunteers who organise activities to raise money for us, and we couldn't manage without them. The training we get is a continuous process, focusing on technical competence and safe handling techniques, and it's given me the confidence to deal with extreme situations without panicking. I was glad I'd done a first aid course before I started, as that's a big help with the casualty care activities we do. We've done a lot on how to deal with ropes and tie knots. That's an essential skill. After a year, I did a 1-week residential course, led by specialists. They had a wave tank where they could create extreme weather conditions, so we could get experience of what to do if the boat turned over in a storm at night, for example. Since I started, I've had to deal with a range of emergency situations, but the work's hugely motivating. It's not just about saving lives. I've learned a lot about the technology involved. My background in IT's been useful here, and I can use my expertise to help other volunteers. They're a great group. We're like a family, really, which helps when you're dragging yourself out of bed on a cold, stormy night. But actually, It's the colder months that can be the most rewarding time. That's when the incidents tend to be more serious, and you realise that you can make a huge difference to the outcome. So, if any of you listeners are interested, why don't you give us a call?